Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Savannah Podcast Meetup. I'm Henrik de Gior. Today we're going to be talking about podcasting automation with Trivinia Barber. Today we have her presentation, and we're going to be talking about automation in podcasting specifically. But we also have one other person on the podcast today and the Meetup, Sherry Green. Did I say their name right? How do you say your name? So I apologize.
Sorry, but it's close enough.
Shari Green. Shari Green, thanks so much for making the time. Yeah. Trivinia, how would you like, Trivinia, do you want to do a quick intro on what you're going to be talking about today?
Yeah, so I'm Trivinia Barber. I founded a company called Priority VA, and we're a virtual staffing company. And after years of doing that and being on a lot of podcasts myself, I had a friend at an event once say, how come you don't have your own podcast? And I said, oh yeah, I don't know how to do the tech. I'm not cool. I'm not interested in all of that. And he said, what if I come to your house and I help you get it all set up? And I said, all right, well then, yeah, I'll do it. And so I have a podcast called Diary of a Doer. And because I do a lot of outsourcing, I wanted to also be sure that I could automate as many pieces as possible to keep the costs low, but the impact high. And so I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about how I use outsourcing and automation to do the least amount of work possible and still create an epic podcast for my guests.
Did you want to share a presentation of some sort?
I'm sure going to, yeah. So I'm going to share my screen now, and then we'll kind of get right to it. So give me 1 second and I'll hit play on this little guy. Mm-hmm. And we're good. Everybody good? We could see a screen?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, perfect. So for those of you who have a podcast, you've probably started it because you wanted to be seen and you wanted to be heard or understood, right? Because you have a message inside you that you needed to get out. Or some people start podcasts because they heard there's good money to be made and they want a piece of the action. But no matter the reason, perhaps some people are finding that it's time consuming and all you wanted to do is have a good conversation or generate leads for your business or share an idea and impact an audience that you serve. So what do we do when that podcasting gets overwhelming? When you know that consistency is key to getting traction, but you wonder if it all has to come from you. Ryan Kahn says, to master your strengths and outsource your weaknesses. And as the founder of an outsourcing company, I totally couldn't agree. More than that. When I started my podcast, Diary of a Doer, I knew I didn't want to do it alone because I'm not a sound engineer, I'm not a marketer, I'm a conversationalist. I have great ideas and I have some expertise on how to build teams you can trust, but that's it. I'm not a podcasting expert. And so I needed to outsource or automate everything that wasn't the conversation, from strategic content creation to the Insta story promo when it's done. And that's what I want to talk to you about a little bit today. So there's 3 components, I believe, to creating a great show: the prep, the production, and the promotion. And I chose to outsource and automate components of all 3 of those things. Not everyone chooses that, but I want to walk through for you each of the areas that you could get some support with, why I outsource or automate them, and the time that it saves me. But first, let's kind of think about podcasting journey as like a mountain, right? We're at the top and everything is hard. You're doing all of the things. Maybe you dread podcast recording days and you find yourself even bargaining kind of like how many episodes are actually required to be successful? Or maybe you're in the middle, starting to get some momentum and maybe you've got some support in a couple of areas, but you find yourself dropping the ball on occasion. So you skip a week here or there when you're not very motivated. And then there's a sweet spot at the bottom of the hill, right? When you've got momentum and your one job is just to hit record and to deliver a fantastic show. So how do we do it? Because it doesn't happen all at once. And so I like to talk about outsourcing outcomes and not tasks. Delegation and in turn automation can be seen as just a one-off portion of our podcast, like editing, which is fine. But then you as the podcast host are often left project managing the episode, right, from start to finish. And you're responsible for all of the different details. For me, that stalls momentum instead of creating it. And so I hired someone in my company called a promoter, and she's in charge of just a sole outcome, which is a complete episode out every single Tuesday at 6 o'clock Pacific. And the rest of the details, right, on who does what and when I'm doing episodes is not up to me. My job is to just hit the mic and drop a great show when I'm told to, and the rest is handled by my team. But in order to keep those delegation hours low, because I want to be really cognizant of cost, right? For a lot of us, our podcasts are an expense at first and not an investment. So we use technology to help us keep things moving where a human isn't necessary. I like to keep things simple. So we use Google Docs for content creation. And we have a podcast episode template with consistent file names. And that helps keep things organized. Asana is a project management system that is free that we use for workflows. And then we use Airtable, which is a spreadsheet on steroids, honestly, but it also has a free version. And it has special views that we like to use because I don't really like Asana, and it shows me only what I need to see. And we set up automation with Zapier, which is a paid tool, but we do that so that I don't get lost in the weeds, micromanaging everything in Asana. But here's the thing about Zapier. It can actually even be used for steps as monotonous as duplicating template files and folders. This helps us keep it consistent and keep it simple. We use Zoom for our interviews, just like this, but we even automated our guest scheduling using an integration with Schedule Once, which is a paid tool. Guests end up picking a time that works for them, and then we use ConvertKit to send out confirmation and follow-up emails for the interview. We even have them fill out a form before the podcast episode, and it tells me all about themselves and their message. And then we begin to use that for our planning and our promotional content. But why end there, right? This form, using Zapier, sends a Slack notification when the questionnaire is complete so that my team gets alerted of like, all right, Sally filled out the form, now go build the episode. When we created these automation systems around our podcast, there's less chance for errors. There's no crazy back and forth, right? Looking for dates when someone's available to host. No emails trying to sort out if they actually sent me their headshot. It's all done before I ever get to the interview. So if you're new to podcasting, or if you've been doing this for a few years, it can kind of seem a little bit overwhelming. So my team put together a totally free resource that gives you our entire podcasting workflow inside of Airtable and Asana. It includes both written and video instructions for you to walk through our internal process so you can set up your own automation right away. And I'm going to give you the link so at the end of the presentation so that you can just dive into it. But what I want to teach you today is a new concept that I literally use for everything that I delegate. And it's going to help you figure out what you can automate too. It's called the 4-bucket strategy because I couldn't think of a cooler name to call it. But as we work through the talk today, I want to give you a little bit of time to think about what you don't know how to do, what you don't have time to do, and what you don't enjoy doing. And then there's the stuff that only you can do. And we're going to look at this in relation to those 3 areas of podcast creation: prep, production, and promo. And there's a worksheet, if you like, to download at teamsyoucantrust.com/buckets. And it's just a copy of this PDF that you can use. And if you want to download it, jot down your notes. But when it comes to prep, I want you to think of all the things that you need to do before you ever hit record. And if you'll list out the tasks that are required that you don't know how to do, don't want to do, or don't have time to do, think about it in relation to only prep. So for instance, when I was an executive assistant years ago, my role included reaching out to pitch guests, to confirm and to schedule with them, getting or even creating their bios sometimes, the content creation for the actual podcast, and idea brainstorming, planning, and even creating an editorial calendar. So what would you put there in your list of the things that you don't know how to do? Before we created a system for her podcast, Amy Porterfield, who's pictured there, wasn't consistent about putting out her show, Online Marketing Made Easy. She would skip episodes because she didn't batch her content. And if a guest canceled last minute, we wouldn't even have any episodes like pre-recorded to kind of turn to. So we had to develop a system that got her and her team ahead. And her show is a top-rated podcast, and it is a lead generation machine, largely in part to the fact that she started working on the pieces that made podcasting difficult. And owning that process for Amy taught me when it was time to create my own show that the success of my show didn't have to come from only me. Amy even ended up automating and outsourcing content creation because she solicited ideas from her students. They'd ask questions. Those answers became content for episodes. Outsourcing opportunities and even automating content, those opportunities are everywhere if you look for them. So I typically save time by batching my content. I record podcast episodes twice a month, interviews on one day and solo episodes on the other day. This is a screenshot of my calendar. So the team links to interview questions, relevant social media accounts, bios, and everything in my calendar ahead of time. I like to say that I hate too many clicks. So my team uses another tool called One Tab. At the bottom here, you'll see We Are Podcast and Facebook and a podcast called Psychology of Entrepreneurship. All I do is click one tab and it opens up everything for me so that when I'm ready to get on with a guest, I have everything that I need. And I can burn out 3 or 4 episodes, and this flow typically works for me. I know other people that batch 13 to 15 episodes in 2 days, so they just do one sort of podcast recording session a quarter. That's too much for me, but I found that I'm nearly 3 months ahead on my content creation because I started reaching out to guests, getting them scheduled and creating the content and being sure it's on my calendar. So when I go to record, it's not a big deal. So I know some people are like, I don't have a budget for all of these tools and I can't afford a team and it's all me. And I don't want you to get caught up in the who right now. What's important is to focus on the what. On that 4-bucket sheet, like what prep can you start to automate? And I want you to think about it and take a minute to just jot down 2 or 3 areas of just the prep that it might save you time to work on automating. What if it's creating content ideas by asking your audience what they want you to teach about? What if it's inviting guests and setting up that guest prep? Blocking your calendar, creating downloads, maybe it's mailing out swag or automatically sending thank you notes using different tools. Think about the ways that you can automate your podcast and outsource opportunities when you find them or when you have the revenue to do that. So working on this outsourcing and automating prep gets me collaboration. I have found that I am so much more creative in a crowd. And having a content director helps me make sense of the ideas in my head so that I don't ramble on shows or stumble over interview questions with my guests. And not having to worry about what guests I'm going to have on this month means that I have the right guests that support my audience instead of just hosting anyone who applies to my show because I got to fill a spot. So let's think about production right now. Having a project management system creates process flow. Before I used Airtable and Asana, I just used a Google spreadsheet. I had content ideas in the list, but I didn't really have a workflow. Nothing was automated, and it was very time-consuming. Episode titles were confusing, and I would even list ideas of what to record and then realize, oh, I already talked about that in episode 52. Like it was just a mess, and I didn't have a way to track it or to reference it. And so project management allows for smooth baton passing and a higher level view of like where all the pieces are. Because picture this, at any point in time, I have up to 12 podcast episodes being worked on. 12. 4 of them in prep, 4 in production, 4 in promotion. And different team members are owning different pieces of the process. And this can get more complicated if it's only you handling it all. So before delegating, I would have it all jumbled in my head. Like which ones were in script, which ones were, ready to be promoted out. And because of all of that conflict, I was getting messed up, and a guest would cancel, and I would just not be sure where I was and what was going on for the next week. And I just spent way too much time in Slack or an email trying to confirm and triple guess that guests were being taken care of. And so using a system allows at a glance in color, because I like it that way, to just get a quick view of where each episode is in the process and that they're all moving down the line like a well-oiled machine. At the end of this, I really want to give you our entire system so that you can start to use it right away. My husband will attest to the fact that I'm so not techie. That's why I was here at the start of this episode. I can barely keep the gain on my microphone in the right setting. And so tech was a barrier to me, even starting a podcast. Having a team like Pod on the Go, or like my editor, Danny, to take care of the sound production meant one less thing for me to use as an excuse not to do a show. Like I said, Danny came to my house and produced the first 5 episodes of my show with me and gave me feedback, and he'd adjust the settings and make sure that I was comfortable. Not everyone can have a Danny, but having someone who gets sound made all the difference for my confidence. So let's face it, your and my highest and best use of our time isn't likely to be cutting out all the ums and confirming the title of our episodes. The tech can be a barrier, I think, to our success, and it doesn't have to be with so many talented people out there to support you. So let's think about, again, on our list of our 4 buckets, not the who, but the what. What could we outsource in that production phase? And what would you delegate? For me, it's that script production with a writer. It's sound editing. It's transcription creation with low-cost tools like Temi or Rev.com. You can even set up automation processes to send your audio files to Temi or to Rev to get those done. Thinking about opt-in or download creation and sending thank you gifts to guests. We get their address at the beginning, so it's easy to send a gift after. Distribution or Libsyn uploading, blog creation, right? All of these project management and outcome ownership stuff can help and can be outsourced and automated to make your time go a little bit better. So what does it get me to do all of that? Peace of mind, really. Years ago, I was in charge of tech for a client's podcast as an executive assistant. There was no greater stress for me than Thursday mornings at 5 o'clock. Did the email go out? Did the link work? Like, is the episode live? It was so stressful for me. And when she had listeners of, 300,000 an episode, it was a mess if it didn't work. And so not having to worry about that now as a podcast host is priceless. If I had to deal with all the tech, nothing would ever go live. It'd live in some folder on a laptop, not synced, not edited, and the episode descriptions would die some crazy slow death in a Slack channel, never to be promoted. Speaking of promo, it's one of the biggest areas that you can get big gains. By now, you've seen the content a dozen times when you're working on a podcast, right? You're numb to it. Maybe you're even a bit bored of it or tired of it. If you're a quick start like me, where you're just like, get excited and then it fizzles out really fast. You feel like all the heavy lifting is done, but if the episode doesn't even get promoted, it's like you ran a marathon and you quit like a quarter mile before the finish line. None of that hard work matters. And you might be really tired, but now you have to write the delivery email. And now you have to create social posts for various channels. You have to find the guest handles and you have to tag them and you have to post on several different platforms. Our energy is limited. And if you have expended a ton of energy just to get the episode recorded, this is the easiest place that most people fall flat because they run out of gas. I believe that this is where you can have a team and have people help you to pick up the baton and run with it, to make sure that each episode doesn't die after production. Like the risque selfie I think a lot of us took and posted in college, podcasts live forever. And we want to take advantage of that because it's paramount. You can end up tagging influencers in your posts to promote your podcast. And when your guests are doing something cool, it'll help boost your show. Jamie Masters is featured here, and she has a show called Eventual Millionaire. And it's been listed as a top podcast multiple times. And so I will be damn sure that I post my episode with her when it airs. And my team ends up highlighting those posts on socials, right? We mention it in our emails to coincide her highlight. When she's getting accolades, we tag her and we borrow her authority. She thanks us for the free promo and I get a boost because there's Jamie, wow, she's amazing, Eventual Millionaire. That's a really cool podcast. Who's this Trivinia chick, right? So you've got to borrow people's authority and you can use automation to do that. But automation for promo is harder to do. It takes more manpower to initially set up, but the process creation itself is helpful for later delegation when you do have a team. We push our content out to multiple platforms like Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and we do that via Hootsuite. There are other high-end paid tools like MeetEdgar that allow for recycled content on a schedule, which does make promotion really simple. We have templates in free tools like Canva. This image was just created in Canva, it's free, and it helped us create uniform images easily to share on social. And the little soundbite up there at the top right above episode 54, that's created with a tool called Headliner. And it makes a cool visual effect. Someone's scrolling and they can see the little wave going, and if they have their sound on, they'll hear my audio. That's cool when people are scrolling Instagram or they're watching my stories. You need to get the most out of every episode that you can. And you do that by outsourcing a repeatable system that you or your team can use to keep traction on a great episode long after its air date. If you create opt-ins that are relevant to your offers, they allow your business to continually grow months after an episode have aired. And if your content is relevant and the takeaways are actionable, you don't have to create anything new. And that is still getting traction for you. So what should we outsource when we think about promo? Social posts and slides, right? Creating a blog post, maybe crafting emails to your list, doing the Insta headliner, creating sound stories. I saw yesterday that Twitter is now allowing sound bites. Like, that's going to be really cool for podcast promotion. And you can set up automation so that once those bites are created, they're automatically pushed out to Twitter. Once you get it, right? Not everyone has it right now. But if you send an episode to your guest with relevant links and images, you can set up automation so that that's done with very little manual labor done at the end of it. We end up reposting episodes and highlight whatever our guests are doing. And we relaunch episodes that are relevant to launches that we're doing. So what would be on that kind of list for you, the things that you don't want to do when it comes to promotion? Promotion is where I tend to fizzle out unless I'm being interviewed by somebody really cool. I'm like, I already did the interview. I don't want to think about that again. Think of a few things that you did just this week with your podcast that you'd rather gouge your eyes out than do again to promote your show. It can be as little as posting on social, and it can be as big as actually, writing the email to promote the episode. But when you work on automating and outsourcing the promotion, your guests and your audience, they get this high-touch treatment without more of your time. They don't have to wonder, like, did my episode ever launch that I recorded with Trivinia? It's because the follow-up is on point, and you get the accolades of giving a great podcast experience for your guests without personally doing anything additional. So if you've never automated anything and you've never outsourced, I think a lot of people can't really imagine the ROI of delegation. And I need to remind you, what is your time worth? So you need to be in your zone of genius. Your episodes need to drive revenue. Outsourcing allows for bandwidth, for doing what you're called to do, which I believe is to create impact. And it gives you the space to feel connected to the content that you're putting out, and your time ends up being freed up to deliver on what you say you're going to do in the podcast. If you've ever wanted to increase your productivity, then you totally know that the less you have to think about what to do next, the more you're going to get done. And the same is true for your podcast. My team helps to ensure that I have everything I need to do a world-class episode and that it's done on time and with excellence. My team manages our writer and they liaise with our editor. But their setup of the automation, guys, they do it. I don't set it up because I'm not very techie. But their setup of the automation means that things are done seamlessly. And all I have to do is turn on my computer and deliver an episode. And so you might have to pay a little bit upfront to get all the automation set up. But then it's go with the flow. So it's a little bit of upfront cost, and then you can just like lean into it later afterward. So I get hustle, guys, and I don't mind working hard. But I don't want you guys working hard on all the wrong things. And if all you do is podcast, maybe doing most of this or all of it yourself might totally make sense. But if you're doing a podcast in addition to like a normal 9-to-5 or another side gig, you may want to consider automating. If you get out of the minutia and you have some more days in flow state, right, than that kind of manic state of what do I have to do next, then you're going to be sure that you're putting out your best work. Delegating the outcomes of prep, production, and promo can ensure that you do that. So here's something I would encourage you to do right now. We do this with all of our clients, not just podcasters, but I challenge you, put a Post-it note on your computer that simply says, do you have to do this? And if you're serious about maximizing your time and getting momentum for your show, that Post-it note is going to transform everything that you do. If you answer no to anything that you're working on when you look at that Post-it note, you should document it, delegate it, and detach from that immediately. Find ways to automate those things so that you're not having to touch things 72 times when you're working on your show. Maybe you're tired and you're like, oh, I don't have the money for this. I'm convinced like I have to do it all if it's going to be done right. Whenever you use some automation or you bring on a team, there's going to be mistakes. There's going to be spilled milk, I say. And you're going to be forced to communicate better or reconsider what the flow you want to be. And sometimes when you automate and you delegate, it's like working out. It's going to hurt like hell for a bit. Your muscles are going to be sore, but you're going to get those reps in and you're going to figure out what the flow needs to look like. And especially if once you have a team to help you with the editing and, Pod on the Go is going to be a great resource for a lot of you for this. A whole new world is going to open up for you. And you're going to realize when you start to automate and outsource your podcast, you become a thought leader, not a thought doer. You'll create better content with collaboration. You'll have time to follow through on your relationship building. And you'll build a team that can do more quality work to impact more lives. And when you automate your podcast, you'll get consistency, predictable, scalable results that you can build on. I had a particularly really hard Q4 in 2019, and it required a 6-week sabbatical for me. And because I had a plan, I had automated as many things as I could, and I had a team, I batched content that had me without needing to work for 9 weeks. I was completely able to step away from our business and my show for nearly 2 months. And I wasn't rushed when I stepped back in, struggling to get momentum again. That's what outsourcing is all about, guys. Freeing up your time to focus on what matters most, whether it's driving revenue, creating a new product, or taking a break. So as we wrap up today, I want you to think about your role in podcasting differently. And you can do one of 3 things. You can do nothing. And maybe you'll just keep kind of going at the pace you are, or maybe you'll quit, or maybe you won't even start a show, or maybe it won't grow because you're overwhelmed. You can take some of what I taught you and just implement a couple of things to relieve some pressure, or maybe find someone to support you in just one of those 3 sections and build up to the big automation and build up to the team that you can trust to handle the pieces. Or you can work with a firm or an agency like Podcast on the Go who already has people trained in this area, ready to go. But no matter what you do or how you choose who you want to have alongside you during the journey, don't do this alone. I always look forward to seeing when people take this information, and I look forward to seeing kind of what they focus on when they can do what really they were created to do. I want to leave a couple of minutes for questions for you. But remember, when I told you that my team put together a gift for you, go to priorityva.com/outsource podcast and get our complete podcasting workflow. It has video, audio instructions, downloads for you on how you can get started on implementing some of this automation right away. So I know some people have questions, and one of the ones that I get most often is, where do I start? Because I know some of this is like drinking from a fire hose. And if you're a control freak like I am, the simple answer is promotion. Because you can still get 80% of the episode to the finish line, and then other people can help you build on the work that you've done to get the podcast out into the world. So that's where I would start if you want to start in getting something off of your plate to free up more time to work on the automation. If you want to work solely on the automation, I would encourage you to start with the setup of getting guests on board and having them schedule, and then getting the episode out to the editors. That's where I would probably start. So have any other questions, guys?
This has been great. Thank you so much. So helpful to understand the how to configure the people, process, technology, and information, right, in order to outsource and automate those things.
Yeah, it's important.
Yeah, for sure. Because it can require people, it can require tools, to your point, right? Or both, right? But were there other questions?
I think it's cool. I've not automated anything. I've been having my podcast for about 15 months. It's called Naturally Unbothered.
I like that title.
It's a sex podcast. So
even more interesting.
A lot of the content and things we do get from previous guests and a lot of the people that follow us. I think right now we currently have about 3,400 followers. And, so that's where we get a lot of our content from. But the problem that I do have is promotion. Everything else I can easily maintain. I'm a pretty organized person. My regular job makes me super organized, but the promotion part, it pretty much, like you said, everything, there's a hype all the way up until, and then once it's released, then day after, it's just like, okay, what's next?
Yeah.
So that's the part that I need help on, is the promotion part. Really. So
do you have any support to help you, or is it just you kind of doing everything right now by yourself?
I do have support.
Good.
I do. I have a really good team. But they're all in the same, they're just like me. Like, we all try to do our promo social media wise. We have postcards, we have things like that, t-shirts, all kind of merchandise. We have those things, but as far as, getting the new listeners and stuff like that, it's been a slow process. And I've been told by, plenty of podcasters who are a little more seasoned, like, oh, you're just in the first year. You're not even really going to be a podcast until year 3. So,
I just spoke in an event that was a worldwide event, but it was called We Are Podcast. And one of the gentlemen who put that event on, he was giving stats, and he said, there are like 1 point something million podcasts out there. So this will hopefully help you feel better. After COVID hit, so it was like the month of kind of mid-March through the end of April, over 100,000 new podcasts were started in that time. Okay. So get this. If you have a podcast that has more than 10 episodes out, okay, you are in the top 1% of all of those podcasts, because most people who have a podcast on iTunes don't have more than 10 episodes. They don't put an episode out every week. Okay. And so you are okay. I tend to get frustrated when people are like, you haven't been podcasting for that long, so it doesn't really count. Most people who start a podcast don't put out more than 10 episodes. So you've been at this for 15 months. So you're getting traction. One thing I would encourage you to do, it's something I had to learn with my show, is to solicit listener feedback. That's something I was always really afraid to do. I was afraid to give a call to action. I didn't want people to think, I just wanted them to opt into my email list. And so solicit feedback, ask for the review, like ask for it in the episode, right? And then highlight those listeners. I struggle with that because I tend to batch my content. So I've got episodes through like October already done. So it's harder to say, oh, Sarah, reviewed my podcast last week and here's what she had to say. But if you can do something like that, right? Even running promotional contests to try and get people to leave reviews, even like a $50 Amazon gift card or something, those will be great ways to get people to get feedback. And then you can kind of get more legs and traction. And then the audience is promoting the podcast for you. Right? Encourage them to share, like take a screenshot of the episode that you're listening to and post it on Instagram and tag me. Those kinds of sort of calls to action, invite the listener in to participate with you in the show. And then you just give them shout outs and then it becomes a little bit reciprocal, right? But yeah, it's hard, but don't lose hope because you're doing a lot better than a lot of podcasters.
Do it for the fun. A lot of people do it for money. Like me and my crew, we feel like when we first got 100 listeners, we were like, why are people listening to us? Like, so we do it for fun. Like we're at technically our 69th episode, but because we're a sex podcast, we want to do something explosive for 69. So it's 6.5 episodes, and we've only missed one episode since we started 15 months ago, and it was due to hurricane. But other than that, every week, every Thursday, we air a show. If it's everyone or just 2 of us, the show still runs. Because we all live in different states. The podcast has always been a remote podcast. Well, when it originally started, it wasn't remote. We all got promotions and stuff like that and ended up living in different places. So the podcast has been remote for several months. So, when everyone was trying to figure out Zoom and this and all that stuff, like this is all the stuff that we were already doing because we've always been basically a remote podcast. So, it's really fun. We enjoy it. And I mean, we said we'll stop doing it when it stops being fun.
Yeah. Well, I can't wait to listen. It sounds really interesting. I had a sex therapist on my podcast once. And as she was talking, like I was getting so red. I couldn't even handle it. And so I've grown up a lot just in that, couple of years I've had my show. So that sounds really good. Do you have any other questions about kind of the automation process or things that you might be able to outsource before we go?
No, like I said, the promotional part is what I'm going to be looking into. I'm going to go through your to your website, look over some stuff. But that's the part that I have the real big hang up on. Everything else, like the production of stuff, I mean, everyone has a piece and a part. And I mean, so my team is really good about that. But we all fall short on the promo part. I think that we fall short because we're not doing it for anyone other than ourselves. So it makes it kind of harder to promote when you're like, I'm going to do it anyway.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, so one thing to think about, and this gets probably a little more like waxing philosophical on it, but if you kind of revisit your why of like why you're doing it, and if you're only doing a podcast for yourself, that does make it a little more challenging to show up and to go that extra mile and to do things that maybe you wouldn't normally do to promote it. And so I would just think of like maybe one listener that you've gotten feedback from of like, oh my gosh, your show cracks me up. And like, I love, listen to you guys talk to each other or whatever. And think about that one person when you're maybe feeling lazy or you're feeling like, I don't really want to go the extra mile to create the images or put this episode in headliner or whatever. And think about the feedback that they are getting, especially sex is a difficult topic, right? And it's a lot of people shy away from. And so if you would like lean into the fact that something funny you say, something like helpful that you say might literally change someone's approach to sex, that might save their relationship or whatever, maybe that'll make it a little bit easier for to lean in and get that across the finish line when it comes to the promotion. I would encourage you to like create some templates that you guys can use. Make it easy for yourself, and don't have to like reinvent the wheel every time you put out a new episode, right? My episode things, I think I did 4 different templates. So I'd have like a lighter one, a dark one for guests, one for solo episodes, right? So that you can kind of mix it up a little bit. But you also want to be consistent so that your listeners know when you post on Instagram, they're like, no, new episode out. They can see it quickly and recognize what's going on, right? And the noise of everything else. So definitely download the stuff. If you have any questions after, feel free to reach out to me. I'm always accessible to help. And I'm going to listen to an episode. I'll give you some feedback on what I would think might be helpful for some promo too.
That would be awesome to give me some feedback. Again, it's called Naturally Unbothered. We're on Spotify, Apple, we're on all those things. So, that'd be awesome.
I will definitely do that. I'll reach out.
Yeah.
Henrik, thanks for having me here.
Absolutely. Speaking of automation, I mean, templates is huge. I mean, using email templates just in Gmail is such a game changer because, instead of rewriting that intro or that, hey, I'd like to have you as a guest, or all the questions and all the intents that you're trying to convey to each guest that you're trying to get on, you can write that one time and just change the name at the top, right? And change, I don't even put a time frame in there. I use Calendly instead of schedule once, but same difference. And so they book the time. I already know how long and when the blocks of time that I'm available for podcasting. So that's the only times they can schedule, right? So like, for example, today I'm booked. I have 4 podcasts, 15-minute segments booked, that where 15 minutes is the entire call for the entire podcast, right? So my obviously my episodes are really short, but that it's all automated because the questions don't change. Right. And if they do, it's very easy to change 1 or 2 questions. I only have 4 or 5 questions anyways. And the format doesn't change. And then back to the promotion, if you want to add, hey, can you give me a review, et cetera, getting that right soundbite, you can recycle that multiple times. You record it once or you record it a couple times, back to Trivinia's point, and recording it and putting it into the audio edit, because audio editing is going to happen anyways, right? So you can have the perfect intros, right? Or intro or intros, your choice, right? You can have the perfect outro. You could have the perfect mid rolls, right? In the middle somewhere. You can have the perfect ads, whatever that looks like. You can have the perfect promos inside of it. And then if you have a great snippet, back to your point earlier, you can take that 1-minute segment and make a headliner video and post it on Facebook, LinkedIn, whatever your channels are, right? Because I found plenty of podcasts that were super valuable because of headliner, not because I've ever looked for said podcasts about XYZ topic, but because they had a headliner about a really, really good point that they made and they took that fraction of a podcast and gave a lot of value there with a small amount of a transcription too. You mentioned Rev and Temi; those are great tools. I happen to switch to Otter.ai.
Otter, yeah.
Yeah, Otter.ai. It's a fantastic tool. I've used it all the time because I use it not only to share, to get show notes or to use the transcript itself, but I use it to edit. because it has the audio so that it's an automated tool. It's like, because I already have boilerplate questions. So when I asked this question, or when I said, oh, sorry, let me say that again, I find the sorry, I remove that segment. It's really easy to get the time frame, or whoever's going to edit my podcast, because I don't do any of the audio editing myself. Again, you can have someone else doing the audio editing so that you gain more time to doing. It's fantastic.
Another thing that I think that you can do for things like headliner and stuff is I'll be sometimes recording an episode with somebody and I will have said something that I'm like, ooh, or I'll hear something from a guest and I just like look at the time. I'm like, okay, 52:25, right? And I just know that's what I want to use for headliner because that was really good.
I do. So, when the titles of our shows are phrases, words, or things that people have said. And so all the titles are just ridiculously outrageous. I create games, different sex games on the show. And so sometimes the questions are the title of the show. So there's the first thing that the feedback that we get about our shows is, where do you guys come up with these titles? They're so awesome. Like the titles are like, but they are meant to grab your attention to make you want to hear or listen to the episode to find out the answer to that question or that phrase that's been said. So that's a lot of times of what draws people into it. But someone else suggested that we start doing more snippets, and I was just kind of like, okay. So you guys are both saying the same thing. So I guess that's one thing that I will start to add the more snippets in, because I just do it every once in a while, probably like maybe twice a month. So I'll start.
Yeah, do it. And you can, we'll often create, 3 or 4 snippets from one episode, because I promote an episode that was done in April. I'll promote that in August, but I'll use a different snippet, right? So someone who's already heard the episode, they didn't catch that part. So then they go back and listen to it again. And they're like, when I listened to that the second time, I learned so much more, right? It's like reading a book. If you read it more than once, you pick up on different things. So don't be afraid of using tools like that to help you get your audience in. And then make sure that so you guys don't have guests, I would assume, on your show then? It's just you guys chatting? Oh, make sure you're sending it out to your guests, right? And giving them the assets too to promote it. Because if you've already created that little soundbite, they're hearing themselves. Everyone likes to hear themselves, right? You give it to them, then they're going to share it because you did the heavy lifting for them. So make sure, utilize those tools. That'll help the podcast grow too.
All right. Well, thank you guys.
Certainly.
Yeah. Was this helpful?
Very.
Awesome. Great. Well, thank you so much for everyone for joining us. Is there anything else we need to, you shared the link to where we can download those resources. Those are super helpful for the audience.
Yeah, for sure.
Please.
So go to priorityva.com/outsource podcast, and that'll give you our entire framework so that you can start automating and outsourcing stuff today.
Absolutely. So one of the things that we're contemplating on the Savannah Podcast Meetup is doing a mastermind. If you guys are interested, contact Raz, who happens to be doing a podcast right now. So that's why he's not on today. We're going to be talking about it tomorrow, and we're going to see if there's interest and how we're going to do it and how many people we're going to have on it, and see, if there's interest from not just in Savannah, because we're remote now, right? So we can do nationally or bigger, right? And see if there's a group of people who want to do this and have a mastermind for podcasting. So let us know if you're interested. Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, until next time, hopefully next month, and take care. Check us out at Savannah Podcast Meetup, and we'll see you next time. Thanks again.